Hello, welcome to Sparks 1524. I'm Nathaniel Miller reporting to you from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Today is July 3rd, 2021. 158 years ago today, on July 3rd, 1863, the Battle of Gettysburg reached its horrifying climax. The action had commenced on July 1st when the Union and Confederate armies pretty much accidentally collided here in Gettysburg. The fighting was fierce and early on favored the Confederates, but the Union Army held firm. By July 3, 1863, General Lee, desperate to end the war and win Southern independence before the South could be worn down by the North's superior industrial might, decided on a frontal charge against the Union lines. However, as controversial as this decision was even back in the day, for example, James Longstreet, Lee's top lieutenant, strongly counseled him not to do it. This charge was not simply a foolhardy rush right in the center of the Union line. It was part of an overall battle strategy that involved attacks on the ends of the Union line and, most critically, a cavalry charge against the rear of the Union line. Basically, Lee was trying to catch his enemies in a pincer. Most people don't even know this battlefield exists, the East Cavalry Field. But it does, and had Jeb Stuart's Confederate cavalry been able to get through, they likely still would not have broken the Union line, but it would have changed up the battle considerably. So before the grand Picketts Charge steps off, let's take a drive about 5 miles east of town to the East Cavalry Field. Here at the East Cavalry Field, the Confederate cavalry attempted to assault and breach the Union rear, snapping their line even as the forthcoming infantry assault smashed their front. Union cavalry, under the overall command of Brigadier General David Gregg, under whom was serving a brigade led by a certain Brigadier General George Armstrong Custer, were ready for them. The Union forces engaged the rebels on these farm fields. The battle was lengthy and the rebels outnumbered their Union foes, but Custer ordered an unexpected charge straight into the Confederates. This move stopped the Confederate momentum cold, ending their hopes of hitting the Union rear and thwarting yet another part of Lee's master plan. These fields are again agricultural fields, but 158 years ago today, they ran with blood, hoofbeats, and the hubristic hopes of Southern victory. In the days before radio communication, there really was no way for General Lee to be informed in time that half of his pincer movement had failed. At about 12 noon, the largest cannonade ever heard on North America went off as the Confederates began firing at the Union line, trying to blast it to smithereens so the infantry would be able to break through much easier. The Union cannon actually stopped firing early, not because they were destroyed, but because the smoke on the field was so thick the Confederates could no longer aim accurately and were shooting over them into the Union rear. Ironically, Union soldiers in the rear who were recuperating from the previous day's fighting were now right back in the line of fire. Picketts Charge got its name from the division of Confederate Major General George Pickett. His was the division that led off the charge to hit the center of the Union line. General Lee had been strongly counseled against this course even before the rest of his battle plan began to fail, but he was determined to stick it out. Today, it's 3 p.m. on July 3rd, 2021. 158 years ago today, to this hour, at approximately 3 p.m. on July 3rd, 1863, 13,000 Confederates stepped off, beginning the slow march across a mile of open land. The Union cannons, long silent when they realized the Confederate artillery had been wildly overshooting due to dense smoke obscuring their aim, now opened up. Great gaps began to appear in the rebel lines as they climbed fences to cross the Emmitsburg Road. Only a handful of rebels would reach the Union line. The fighting was fierce, but the issue was never in doubt. Lee's grand, complex plan had utterly failed, while Meade's simple, efficient plan won the day. What was left of Lee's men began to stagger back toward their lines, if they could still walk. And just like that, it was over. About 13,000 men went out on Picketts Charge. Approximately 7,000 came back. Lee's army was devastated. It's interesting because we have a pouring rain on us now in Gettysburg here, July 3rd, 2021. Well, on July 3rd, 1863, a pouring rain began that night and continued through July 4th, giving Lee cover as he effected his retreat. As the armies left, an army of the dead was left on the field. The Southern soldiers were left in their shallow graves to be reinterred south later at state expense. The federal dead, however, would be cared for by the U.S. government. The most efficient way to do that was to create a national cemetery here in Gettysburg. The federal dead could be reinterred here, and the devastated town could begin the decades-long process of recovery. That cemetery would be dedicated with speeches by everybody from Edward Everett, one of the greatest orators of the day, to a certain President Abraham Lincoln on November 19th, 1863. President Lincoln arrived in Gettysburg the afternoon of November 18th, 1863. He stayed the night in the house of David Wills before joining a procession down Baltimore Street to the new cemetery. Two of the trees on this street, including the big sycamore tree outside the wartime building that currently houses the modern Mr. G's, were alive during the battle and witnessed the carnage, and also witnessed President Lincoln passing in front of them on his way to the ceremonies. The dead in the cemetery are laid out in semicircular arcs. The ground where the Grand Soldiers' Monument stands today was likely the site of the stage for the dignitaries. This is where Abraham Lincoln delivered the short 2-minute speech that redefined the war and the promise of America, a promise that these dead should not have died in vain, but that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. News of the victory at Gettysburg reached Washington, D.C. on July 4th. Coming on the heels of that announcement was news that General Grant had captured Vicksburg, a seemingly impregnable fortress on the Mississippi River. By capturing Vicksburg, Grant was able to reopen the Mississippi to Union commerce and physically split the Confederacy in half. These twin victories marked the turning point of the war. Robert E. Lee's seemingly invincible Army of Northern Virginia had been decisively defeated. The seemingly impregnable fortress at Vicksburg had fallen to the Union advance. Momentum had forever shifted to the United States. When you come to visit a battlefield, don't just take the driving tour. That's a great way to orientate yourself to the grand and bloody pageant, the big scope of everything. But after you get orientated, get out of your car and spend some time walking the field. By walking from site to site to site, you'll get a much better visceral understanding of what happened there, the scale of it. You'll get a much better appreciation of what these soldiers went through as they carried 20, 30, 40 pounds of gear on their back while being shot at on hot days with little water. Additionally, many towns, such as Gettysburg, were themselves battlefields. The battlefield is not just the land the National Park Service is able to preserve. The town itself is also part of the battlefield. Seek out those places. Learn the stories that usually don't make the history books. This will help you to understand not just the battle and the grand military activities that happened, but you'll come to realize that in many ways the people who were living, dying, or just trying to survive these events are not much different than we are today. If you care to read more about my time here at Gettysburg, part 3 of my column is linked below in the description. If you enjoyed this video, I invite you to share it if you think it's worthwhile. I would ask you to hit that little like button, and if you think I've earned it, please subscribe and follow my ongoing content. I thank you very much for your time. I wish you a happy Independence Day, and until we meet again, remember to always go and do great things.